Life had always felt like a series of relentless blows, with only brief moments of light breaking through. Losing my parents early left a wound that never truly healed, a dull ache that lingered no matter how many years passed. But then, fate handed me a rare kindness, the Parkers, the elderly couple next door. They took me in without hesitation, treating me as more than just a charity case. To them, I was family. We didn't have much, but love made up for what money couldn't provide, and for a while, that was enough. Just as I was beginning to find my footing, turning 18, dreaming of college, the world turned cruel again. The Parkers were killed in a car accident. In an instant, I was alone once more. They left me a small sum for school and their cozy suburban home, but the memories inside those walls were too heavy to bear. I sold it and used the money to buy a modest apartment in the city, close to the college where I'd enrolled to study financial management. Having a plan felt like control, like I was finally steering my own fate. College was demanding but fulfilling, and I immersed myself in numbers, markets, and everything money-related. After graduation, I secured a decent job, throwing myself into work. The days were busy, productive, but the nights? They were empty, filled with a loneliness that even the bustling city couldn't drown out. Then I met Tom. It was at a friend's party, loud music, cheap drinks, and the chaotic energy of strangers packed into a tiny apartment. Tom was the life of the party, all laughter and unfiltered charm. Our first encounter was pure mayhem. He bumped into me, spilling my drink. "Hey, watch it," I snapped, startled. "My bad, let me make it up to you. What were you drinking?" he asked, flashing a grin so unapologetic it was almost impossible not to smile. "Just a beer," I said, feigning indifference. "2 beers, coming right up," he declared, weaving through the crowd toward the makeshift bar. That was Tom, straightforward, clumsy, and entirely himself. We spent the rest of the night talking about everything and nothing, and by the time the party ended, I wasn't ready to say goodbye. A year later, he proposed in the most Tom-like way possible, on the couch, mid-TV show, his hand shaking as he pulled out a ring. "Marry me?" he asked, gripping the tiny box like it might disappear. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly us. "Yes, you big goof." At first, marriage didn't change much. We were still us, just legally bound, and life in my small city apartment felt warmer with him there. For the first time in years, the nights weren't hollow. Then, life threw another curveball. Tom's parents, the Dawsons, were wonderful, welcoming me as if I'd always been part of their family. Weekend visits to their suburban home became a comforting ritual, filled with home-cooked meals and easy conversations. But life has a way of shifting when you least expect it. Tom was sent away on a year-long business trip, and soon after, the Dawsons' health took a sharp decline. One afternoon, Mrs. Dawson's voice trembled over the phone. "Grace, I hate to ask, but we really need your help." There was no hesitation. Family sticks together. I moved into their home, taking over the cooking, cleaning, and whatever else they needed. I rented out my apartment, using the income to help with their expenses. The days were long, the responsibility heavy, but I told myself this was what family did. Then Emily arrived. Mrs. Dawson's daughter from her first marriage swept into the house unannounced, bringing tension like a brewing storm. She was an unfamiliar presence, her motives unclear. One evening, as I prepared dinner, she leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, her tone sharp. "Just so we're clear," she said, voice laced with hostility, "I'm not here to play housemaid or caretaker." I met her gaze calmly. "That's fine, Emily, I've been managing things, and I can keep at it." "Good," she said, her eyes daring me to challenge her, "because I don't plan on lifting a finger. This is Mom's house, after all." From that moment, Emily's presence became suffocating. She ordered takeout for herself and her mother, leaving the empty containers for me to clean. She whispered to Mrs. Dawson at night, sowing seeds of resentment. The warmth I'd once felt in this house began to erode. One evening, as I set the table, Mrs. Dawson looked up with a rare softness. "Grace, why don't you sit and eat with us tonight?" Before I could respond, Emily cut in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Mom, Grace has been busy all day. She probably prefers eating later." The message was clear, I wasn't welcome. Slowly, the woman who had once treated me with kindness grew distant, her gratitude replaced with cold commands and silent judgments. Then, Mr. Dawson passed away. and everything unraveled. The funeral was a somber affair, heavy with grief and unspoken tensions. Harry arrived just in time to say goodbye to his father, his presence a brief but welcome relief in the storm that had become my life. "How have things been while I was gone?" he asked softly during a rare private moment. I forced a smile, pushing down the truth. "Fine. Everything's fine." Harry studied me, his concern evident. "You sure? You look exhausted." "It's just been busy, helping out around here," I deflected, unwilling to burden him when his own grief was already so heavy. This wasn't the time to unpack the battles I was fighting beneath the surface. But the moment Harry left, Emily shed her mask. The grieving daughter disappeared, replaced by the domineering force I had come to know too well. And Mrs. Dawson, whether lost in grief or simply choosing sides, mirrored her daughter's coldness. Conversations became clipped, then became commands, and soon I was no longer a welcomed presence in the house I had worked so hard to hold together. Emily wasted no time making that clear. She barged into my room without knocking, rifling through my belongings like they were hers to claim. One afternoon, seeking a moment of peace in the garden, I stumbled upon a box shoved into the shrubs. Inside, I found my watches, jewelry, even my underwear. A few of my dresses hung carelessly over a bush, left to the mercy of the elements. A sickening wave of anger and humiliation surged through me. I gathered my things and stormed inside, my hands shaking. Emily lounged in the living room, smug and expectant, as if daring me to confront her. "What the hell, Emily?" My voice trembled with fury. "You can't just throw my things out." She barely blinked. "Live here? Please. You're just a guest, and an unwelcome one at that. You should be in the garden, or better yet, on the street. Isn't that where freeloaders belong?" The words struck like a slap. I turned to Mrs. Dawson, desperate for some sense of reason, some remnant of the woman who had once welcomed me. "Mrs. Dawson, please." My voice cracked. "Tell her she can't do this. This is supposed to be my home too." But Mrs. Dawson's gaze was cold, void of the warmth I had once known. "This is Emily's house now," she said flatly. "She's right, Grace. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live." The finality of it stole the breath from my lungs. The home I had fought to sustain, the family I had sacrificed for, it was slipping away. Still, I stayed. Bound by the promise I had made to Mr. Dawson on his deathbed, to take care of his wife, to not let Emily manipulate her. But every day, the weight of that promise grew heavier. Mrs. Dawson, once kind and grateful, had adopted her daughter's cruelty. "You're just sitting around here, aren't you?" she snapped one evening as I scrubbed the kitchen counters. I inhaled sharply, keeping my voice steady. "I'm doing my best to keep things running." "Your best?" Could have fooled me. "You're nothing but a leech," she scoffed, walking away without another glance. The irony stung. I had rented out my apartment and sent nearly all the income to this household. Emily, on the other hand, lived off her mother's pension without lifting a single finger. One night, as I lay awake, I heard Emily's voice drift through the walls. "What does my brother even see in her?" she sneered. I bit my lip, swallowing the anger rising in my chest. But everything changed the evening I came home early from work. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard hushed voices from the living room. "We need to get her to sell that apartment." Emily's voice was sharp with greed. "Do you know how much money we could make?" "Yes, but how do we convince her?" Mrs. Dawson's tone was laced with frustration. "Grace isn't stupid. Leave it to me," Emily said, her voice dripping with malice. "I'll sweet-talk her. Once she signs it over, we can finally live the way we deserve." A cold dread settled in my stomach. They weren't just pushing me out. They were plotting to strip me of the only security I had left. My hands trembled as I packed my essentials, my heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and fury. There was nothing left to fight for here. Without a word or a backward glance, I slipped out the back door, leaving behind the house that had become a battleground, a family I no longer recognized. In the taxi to the station, I clutched my bag tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. Doubt swirled in my mind like a restless storm. Would Harry believe me? Would he take their side? But the fear of staying was far worse than the fear of leaving. As the train rumbled forward, the landscape blurred outside the window, green and gray streaking together, mirroring the mixture of fear and resolve settling in my chest. By the time I arrived at Harry's place, exhaustion weighed me down, but so did relief. The door opened, and there he was. His eyes widened, scanning my face, my frazzled state, the tight grip I had on my bag. Grace. The single syllable held a world of questions. I exhaled shakily. Can I come in? What are you doing here? Is everything okay? Harry's voice was laced with concern as he stepped aside, his eyes scanning my face. I hesitated, the warmth of his home tugging at my fragile composure. No, Harry, everything's not okay, not at all, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression darkened as he guided me to the couch. Talk to me, babe, what happened? With a deep breath, I let it all spill out, the suffocating tension in the house, Emily's cruelty, Mrs. Dawson's betrayal, and their scheme to take my apartment. I had kept it bottled up, not wanting to burden him, but now the dam had broken. With every word, Harry's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. By the time I finished, he was pacing, fury radiating off him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His voice was rough with frustration. I thought I could handle it, I admitted, shame creeping in. Harry exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Grace, you shouldn't have to handle anything like that alone. I can't believe my own mother and sister treated you this way. He turned to me then, his gaze fierce. I'm not letting anyone treat my wife like that. No way. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and dialed his mother. The call barely rang twice before she picked up, though I couldn't hear her words. Harry's stiff shoulders and the thunder in his voice told me enough. Mom, this stops now. I know everything. If Emily doesn't leave and you don't start treating Grace with respect, we're done. No more money, no more help, nothing. There was a sharp exchange, but Harry didn't waver. His voice was firm, final. When he ended the call, he turned to me, his anger fading into something softer. Looks like it's just us now, babe, but that's all we need. He pulled me into his arms, and I melted into him, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting. Just us, I murmured, believing it more than ever. The next few days were a blur of change. I arranged for remote work, and Harry helped me retrieve my belongings from storage. We set up a cozy home office in the corner of his living room, small, imperfect, but ours. Most importantly, it was peaceful. Then, one afternoon, a call shattered that peace. Mrs. Dawson. Her voice, sharp with entitlement, filled my ear. Grace, where's this month's money? You know we depend on it. I blinked, momentarily stunned by her audacity. After everything, you still expect me to support you? My tone was incredulous. In the background, Emily's voice cut through, shrill and demanding. She's just ungrateful, make her send it. A slow, bitter laugh escaped me. I took a steadying breath, my anger settling into something colder, something resolute. Mrs. Dawson, Emily called me a ruthless beggar. I'm not sending money to people who treat me like garbage. I'm done. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear the shock in her pause. Then, a quieter plea, but we're family. I closed my eyes. Family doesn't treat each other like this. With that, I ended the call. My hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear, it was from freedom. Harry was beside me in an instant, his hand warm over mine. You did the right thing, Grace. It's time they learned to stand on their own. Life moved forward, and with it came something unexpected, something beautiful. A positive pregnancy test. The news filled us with a joy so bright it drowned out the shadows of the past. We decided to sell my apartment and buy a small house in the suburbs, a place where our child could grow up safe, loved, and free from toxicity. Just as we were settling into our new life, another call came. This time, Mrs. Dawson's voice was different. Grace. I made a mistake, she said, her words shaking. Emily forced me to sell the house. She took the money and left me with nothing. I have nowhere to go. Could I come live with you and Harry? Pity stirred in my chest, but it was drowned by something stronger. Mrs. Dawson, I forgave you long ago, but forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. You need to live with the consequences of your choices, just like I had to. I ended the call, blocking her number. My heart was heavy, but my conscience was clear. Months later, as I cradled our newborn daughter, Mia, Harry kissed my forehead and whispered, "We did it, babe." And we had. The past had lost its hold on me. We had built a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of peace I never thought I'd have. Against the world, together, we were stronger than ever.